Well, welcome back everyone. This is part 2 of this week's video set in Chapter 4, and we're going to take a look in this video at the Product Manager application in this chapter. And what you're looking at here is what we looked at in the last video, which is the viewer. And just in case you're watching the second part without just having seen the first one, what this does is it lists all the categories in the categories table in our guitar database on the left, and then on the right, for the selected category, it shows all the products, and it chooses the default category of the first one if you haven't made a selection. And of course, once you make a selection, notice here it reloads the page and it appends this category ID name value pair up here onto the address bar, which is a mechanism that puts this into the get superglobal array in PHP, enabling us to read out the category number and use that to load this table here on the right. Well, that's all this first application does. And in the application we're going to look at in this video, we're going to go deeper than that. We're going to actually go in and be able to add, edit, and delete both categories and products. This application is for the end user, where they can just view things. They can't make any changes. But when we switch over to the Product Manager application, obviously here you have those capabilities. And so, for instance, if you select a category now, you'll notice there's a delete button next to each product, and then you can add a product. You pick the category it's in and you add it. So adding and deleting products, and then this page is the one you'll have to develop for your assignment, where you're going to, just like the products, you're going to see a list of categories and you'll have the same delete button next to each one, and then this add category will become a link just like it is on this page, where you can click it to add a category. So you're going to be adding capabilities similar to what's been done here with the product, only you'll do them for the category. So that's where you're headed, and so we'll take a look at this program. We'll dive into the code and get you up to speed on this one, and then you'll have to take this forward and get this carried through in the assignment as we just discussed. So I'm in the home page now of our Product Manager project. As you can see, I'm looking at index.php. Now, I'm not going to go back over the stuff that we did in the last video. You can go back and watch that to get all of the details from what's happening here. But I'll show you what's new. The new stuff is down here where you're displaying the table, which is right here, this delete button column. That's the new part. So going back here to IntelliJ, you see here you have the first 3 columns, and again, there's nothing new here, but this 4th column is what's new. Okay, you're in a for each loop. You're displaying each product one by one, and at this point you are creating inside of your column cell a form. This form is going to include a submit button that says delete, and when you click that button, it's going to take and package up this form and package up all the name value pairs for whatever's in the form, which in this case there are just 2. And it's going to send that information to deleteProduct.php using the post method. So what is it going to package up? Well, you'll notice here we have a hidden field, and it's the product ID. So we need to carry that over to the page that's going to delete the product, and then we also have a hidden field for the category ID. the values for both are set, and PHP is echoing those actual values in to the value attributes of the input tags. Now all the user sees is a delete button. So each one of these is a separate form, and each one of them goes to the same page. The difference is that there are different IDs involved for each one. Now if I view the source for this page, you can see this here. You see how it brings up a form taking you to delete product, and here are your hidden controls for product ID and category ID, and then you can see the actual values here for each case, and then you have your submit button. So that's all being generated by the PHP code. So the bottom line is you can push delete for any one of these and it blows it away. So how does it actually blow it away? Well, let's take a look at that. So it's going to load up a page called delete_product. That's this page right here. This page is going to connect to the database, as you see in line number 2. And incidentally, anytime you have a PHP file that needs to connect to a database, you need to put this require once command in there. Because you're using require once, you won't have the problem of trying to do that more than one time in a particular instance of a page. Just remember, you start with the page that's being loaded, and then any of the include statements or require statements, it's almost as if you were copying and pasting in whatever code page they're referencing. So here you would go to the database PHP, you take all that code and basically just copy it and paste it right where this line is to follow the logic of it. So this connects you. Now we go to the post array and we pull out product ID and category ID, expecting both to be integers. And as long as both of those IDs are not false, and by the way, they shouldn't be because you're using the post method and there's no address the user can tamper with. But just as a safeguard, you don't want to do any of this work if either one of those are false. So as long as they're both not false, we create a query, and it's an action query. We're deleting from the products table where the product ID equals, and then here's a parameter because of the colon there. Colon product ID means that you have to bind a real value to this fake placeholder. So you prepare the query for execution, and then you bind the real product ID to the label or placeholder, and then you execute the query. Now, you might be wondering at this point, or maybe you wondered this in the last video, why don't we just, instead of using this whole binding thing that we're talking about, why don't you just go like that? Change this, to a double quote, and do that, right? I mean, after all, PHP is perfectly capable of doing this. It'll concatenate or plug in the product ID here, and you'll end up with delete from products where product ID equals, and that'll be a number. And you don't have to do this binding thing. It just seems like extra work, right? Well, that's true, but the reason that's done this way is to prevent what's called an SQL injection attack. And what that is is that when a query string like this is generated and sent to the DBMS for execution, if you create this string as a raw string and pass it around, in certain cases, hackers can grab that string in your code and inject into it their own SQL. For instance, in this case, they could change the equals to a not equals right here. And what would that do? It would delete all of the products except the one that you want to delete. And that could be quite catastrophic, right? Or if they really wanted to be malicious, they could say drop database my guitar 1, and it would blow the entire database away. Not quite what we wanted, right? So an injection attack is what this is called, an SQL injection attack. And without getting into all the details of how they could do this, the point is this binding mechanism with a parameterized query is a security measure that prevents hackers from doing that. And again, without getting into all of the technical details of it, that's why this is done this way. So we have our query, it's parameterized, we plug in the parameter here, and we run it. And in this particular case, this command is either going to work or it isn't going to work. We're assuming here that it will. So this success variable will be either true or false, and we're not even checking it. Normally, you would want to check it and make sure that it really did work. In this case, we're just assuming that it will. Now, another thing that didn't occur here, and I would have liked to have seen this and they didn't do it, would be to just ask the user for confirmation before you delete the record. Usually when you click a button in a page like this, it will ask you, are you sure you want to delete the product? Because it's a pretty big deal. If you delete the product and you want it back or you change your mind, you have to add all that stuff back in. So usually when we delete things, we ask for confirmation. Now, we'll learn how to do that here eventually, but for right now, they didn't go there. They just kept it the way you see it. Now, once you've done all this work, you include index.php. Now, remember what I said earlier about the sequence of things. When the user wants to delete a product, they are going to hit the delete key, which is going to load up another PHP document. That PHP document starts here with this require command taking you to database. Notice there's no HTML in this file. So that when it comes back here, it continues to run, and again, there's no HTML at all so far. So when you include index.php, you can actually do that because of the fact that you haven't written any HTML yet. When you include index.php, it goes over here and takes all of this code and basically pastes it into the delete product URL. Which is why you see in your address bar delete product sitting up there, and yet when you look down here, you're looking at your home page. Well, the reason for that is because this file, deleteproduct.php, included the home page in its HTML, which is what you're seeing. Now, this is the reason it's so important to use require once instead of include for your connect PHP scripts, because we already did our connect here. So when we include our home page, we don't want to do the connect again. Now the home page also uses require once. So what that means is that it will not execute line 2 because it already had executed it here in its source file that included that index.php file. So you may not think you need it, and like in this case, you wouldn't think you would need require once, because looking at the page from top to bottom, it's fine, right? There's no other connect opportunities. And yet, here you find yourself in another page, including your home page. And if you had not anticipated that, you'd have had a problem. So it's always good to put require once in, even if you don't think you're going to need it, just in case you end up needing it. Well, this page will come up as usual. The only difference is there'll be one less product to show for that category that's being displayed, assuming you deleted the product out of the guitars category. Now if you went into basses and let's go drums, see you blow away the tama here, okay? And you come back, the tama will be gone, and that's what you want to have happen. So the other thing I wanted to show you here is the add product page. That's the other new page that they did complete. And again, let's take a look at the list of files here. Add product and add product form we have to talk about yet. Category list is a page that you're going to have to build for the assignment. We've already talked about those two pages. We just talked about delete product, and then we did index. So this little guy right here, we need to talk about him, and there's 3 pages yet that we have to talk about. So with that, let's go back and take a look at add product. It brings up a page called add product form, and when you fill it out and click the button, it comes up with the add product page. So that's the reason there are 2 different pages here. One is the form where you fill it out, and that submits to add product, where you actually do the work of adding it. When I say you, I mean the PHP script. So let's take a look first at the page that collects the information. And as you can see back on the screen here, it has to populate this list box with categories. So we need to connect the database, and we need to write up a query that grabs all the categories, and we do that here. So categories fetches, or I'm sorry, category stores all of the records that we need, all the category records, and then we can go into HTML. And so again, when you're building these pages, you want to start by getting all the data that you need up at the top, and then go into HTML, and then jump out to PHP when you need to. So you've got a form here, and its action attribute takes you to add product.php. The ID of the form is add product form, and we have a label with a category ID. This is a select control, so it's a drop-down list, and as you know, when you do a select control, you have to have a series of option attributes. I'm sorry, not attributes, option elements inside of your select tags. So I'll just go ahead and show you here what I'm talking about. Now it doesn't look very nicely formatted, but you have a select control, and you notice the option elements here, and there are 3 of them, and each one has a value, and it has text inside of it like that. Well, that's generated by the PHP file, which again is here. So for each category in categories, notice the order here. This is the big enchilada that holds everything. And this is one specific category in that collection. The loop takes you through one at a time, and you echo the category ID inside of the value, and then you echo the name in between the two option tags. And then here, this ends your for each. So notice how you're getting in and out of PHP. Right? You get in PHP here to start your loop. You get in here to end your loop. And then you're in and out in these two areas to echo out content. This is different if you've done programming. It's different to have to switch in and out of two different languages simultaneously, and it takes a while to get used to even being able to do that, much less actually doing it and knowing when to do it. So it's perfectly fine. You just have to be very careful about your delimiters, that you don't miss a delimiter. Well, the rest of this is straightforward. There's no other PHP in here. So what they're going to do is they're going to pick a category, and they're going to type in a code, which, let's see, I can't remember what the codes were. I'll just put the number in there. This is a guitar shop. We've got a product. Amazing strings, list price $4.99, and we'll click Add Product. When you click it, notice how it shows up. Now, let's go back and take a look here at what happened. So we go to click the Submit button, takes us to Add _ product. This page comes up. Now, you go to the post to look at the category ID that was submitted, and you also want to grab the code and the name and the price. So what is all of that? Well, again, all of that stuff is here. This is right here. This control is the category ID, and then you've got code, name, and price. So whatever's inside of those text boxes, you're getting those here, and you're putting them into variables. Notice for the price, you're adding a validation step. You can't really validate the code or the name so well, but the price you can validate. Here you're validating that it's a float. If they screw it up, then price is going to be false. If they forget to add it, then price is going to be null. For the code and the name, if they don't put anything in, they will be null. Otherwise, they'll be set to something. For category ID, it has to be set valid because something has to be selected out of the list. But you see how it comes pre-selected. You can't get it into a state where nothing is selected here. So when we validate our inputs, we're looking to see if any of these variables are null. And then for price, not only do we check for null, but we also check for false, because you can either not put the price in, or you can put it in, but it wouldn't be a valid float that you entered in there, in which case it would be false. So when you do validation, you have to test for null and for false. And since you have the pipes for OR here, all those conditions, if any one of them is true, we have a problem. If we have a problem, we create an error message. And then we include error.php. That file generates HTML, and it just simply prints out the error. And that's happening right here. Now, because we haven't written any HTML yet, we can get away with that. If all of this stuff is okay, I'm just going to go ahead and reformat this again with the braces the way I like them. So if all of this passes, nothing's wrong, it goes to the else, comes in here, and then at this point it connects to the database because it has to store the product. So it connects. It creates a query to insert into products all the fields and then values. Notice each one of these is a parameter. So I have to prepare the query first, and then I have to bind all 4 parameters to the actual values coming out of these variables. Then I execute the query, I close the cursor, and I reroute them back to index.php. Now again, if you come through this, you go to add product, you work your way through this, no HTML, right? This all works okay, so you skip this section, you come down here, this guy doesn't have any HTML in it. So basically, by the time you reach this point, you have not written any HTML out, so you can safely include your index.php file here. The only weird thing that happens, I guess you could say, is that when you add a product, it still shows add product.php up at the top because you really didn't reload the index page. You are technically still quote-unquote on add product.php because add product.php included the index page. It didn't redirect to it, it included it. So whatever code is in this file is considered part of this page now, add product, even though we know that it's really its own page, or at least can be rendered as its own page. So that's how you go about deleting a product. Now what if you were going to edit a product? How would that work? Well, you'd have another column with edit buttons, and you would set them up exactly the same way as you did the delete. The only difference is you basically would make another one of these, and you would call it edit product. And your value for your button would be edit, like that. If I were to go back here, the edit buttons would show up in their own column. See that? Okay. Now when you click edit, you're going to need an edit product page, just like you had a delete product page. Your edit product page will look a lot like your add product form page, except it will say edit product form, and it will be exactly the same as add product form, except it will be sticky, or it will come in where the values will be preloaded. So in here you're going to have value equals, and you're going to get into PHP, and you're going to echo the code. Now how do you get the code? Well, that's going to have to be read in at the top with a query. You're going to know what the ID is. So you're going to have to, knowing that, you're going to have to query the data for that product so that you can set it inside of your form so that the user can edit that code. Remember, with add product, when you come in, you're not doing anything, or I should say, you don't need to transfer any data from index to add product. But if you're editing and you go from index to edit product, you have to carry over the ID just like you do with the delete. So right here, this is what we really need in our edit product form to do, and then we need to query the database to pull the product in so that we can show all the data in our edit form. When they click submit, you can take them to an edit product page where you actually go in just like add product does, except instead of inserting into, you're going to update instead of insert into. So you'll do an update query instead of an insert query. Now for the page where you list your categories, they started that but they didn't finish. So here you just have to write a loop that shows all of your categories, and then you'll want to have a delete button next to each one of them. And then also you could put an edit button if you wanted to, and you would go through the same process with categories as what you did with products to build that out. It will require a whole nother set of pages. An add category form, an edit category form, a delete category. And the same would be true if you were going to build edit product capabilities in. You'd have an edit product and an edit product form in addition to what you already have. So potentially you could have up to 8 additional files if you wanted to add in add, edit, and delete capabilities for both the products and categories. So if you understand what's going on here, you should be able to crank this thing out and get this thing working. But I would suggest you use IntelliJ for this because it does help a lot in terms of validating your code, making sure that it's right, and also just troubleshooting. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up for now. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, good luck on the assignment, and we'll be moving ahead into the next chapter, and we'll just continue to crank out more and more functionality out of these pages as we move forward. So until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Take care.